Hello and good evening. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. It is election day in the UK. Millions of voters across the country are heading to the polls in what could be a transformative moment for British politics. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is in a fierce battle to retain his position, facing a formidable challenge from Labour leader Keir Starmer. As the Conservatives brace for what could be a historic defeat, all eyes are on whether Labour will secure a decisive victory. However, is it a foregone conclusion? The stakes couldn't be higher. With polls indicating a substantial lead for Labour, the Conservative Party is urging voters to prevent their rivals from gaining a significant majority. Now, this election also marks the return of Nigel Farage to the frontline politics with Reform UK, adding another layer of complexity to an already intense race. As the major parties make their final appeals, issues such as living standards, health, immigration remain at the forefront of voters' minds. Now tonight, we will delve into these key issues surrounding the campaign and what the election results could mean for the UK, as well as their relations with the world. Right now, we have Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers. He is, of course, the Deputy Executive Director of Development, Research and Innovation at the Asia-Europe Institute, First of all, welcome to the show, Doctor. First question, what are the key issues being contended in this election and how have they shaped the campaign strategies of the parties?
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Hafiz, and in fact, it's an honor to be here. Okay, let's deep dive into this issue. The UK 2024 elections, what are the key issues that have been, in the past 1 month? Number one, economy. As we know, the UK's economy has been doing too well, especially since the COVID-19. Inflation has gone as high as 11%. Of course, now has come down a bit, but it still is a major concern. The price of energy is also an issue which is within the economy. Apart from economy, one of the key issues is also in terms of National Health Service, which has been pretty poor in the recent times. Some people have been complaining about the poor service has been slow for emergency, for example, people getting an appointment in the government hospitals, as simple as a dental appointment, to more serious cases, insufficient of beds in the government hospitals. That goes in regards to health. And apart from that, the one major problem is also immigration and political asylum. The UK has been facing the problem of, illegal migrants coming in, crossing the English Channel almost on a daily basis. And also not forgetting the problem of housing, price of houses, rental has been going very high, the problem of sanitation and crime, and these are part of the major issues. And I must say that this is a significant election because since Brexit, this is also the election post-pandemic, and sadly also since the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So this is a significant election, after these few events.
Yes, Doctor, but all the issues that you've mentioned are pretty much also, I would say, other countries are also facing them, and especially these countries in Europe. However, what do you think are the main factors or main issues affecting Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's party heading into these elections? Because bearing in mind, they have a legacy of his predecessors. In fact, they had change of 4 PMs in the past 5 years. What about that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, these issues may be, you may say it's a common issue, but it has an impact on the UK. For example, health. I think that is one problem which many people are facing. The bad service of or rather the poor service of the National Health Care Service or Health Service. But apart from that, the Tories of the Conservatives have been power for 15 years. If you come 2025, so they've been there for 14 years. It has been long, and you have rightly pointed out the change of prime ministers within a short period of time. You have Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and so this have caused some of dissatisfaction after 14 years, and now Labour under a new leader. So it appears to be more attractive, and it has been anticipated. But of course, we have to wait for the final results to be out in a short while time, right? Of course, the time difference between UK and Malaysia, but it's been forecast that Labour will be able to have, I won't say a clean sweep, but a landslide majority, maybe be one of its best results since almost 150 years.
Yeah, before we take a closer look at how Labour is expected to perform, the lower numbers polled by Sunak's Conservative parties, I would like to know how have smaller parties like Reform UK, who is furthermore on the right, influence the political landscape in this particular election?
Yeah, as the elections in the UK, for many, many years, it has always been this bi-party system, the two poles, if I may say, the Conservatives or the Tories or the Labour. So they have been the main, I would say, the hegemonic power in local politics of the UK. There are also these new parties, which we may call them as the third force, like the Green Party or the Scottish Nationalist Party, and the Liberal Democrat Party. They do play a role as an alternative for people too happy with either parties. Nevertheless, based on the forecast, it is still between this. The clash is always between the two titans, that is Labour and the Conservatives. However, I do not disregard their significance in coming years. And if, for example, come a time that there is a hung parliament, I don't think that will be the case for this time in 2024. But if ever there will be a hung parliament, these parties also play a crucial role as to form a coalition government, and they had it. So
looking
role.
Yeah, Doctor. So looking further ahead, I mean, how significant is the voter turnout, and what impact could it have on this particular election results? Is it a factor where it will increase Labour majority, or does it will make Conservatives lose even more? How significant is this particular voter turnout?
All right, I believe that, as I mentioned earlier on, that the voters turnout is a demonstration that they want change. After 14 years of Conservative Party, I think they have given them sufficient time to prove themselves. Perhaps they have done so, but in the last 5 years, if you look at the results in the last election, they did win with a big majority under Boris Johnson. I think they, in the last 5 years, especially during the pandemic, there have been a lot of dissatisfaction, and also perhaps the leaders, such as, with due respect, but the controversy of Boris Johnson's statement during the COVID have been seen as, so this has caused some dissatisfaction among the voters, and they want change. That is a clear sign of change. And if we look at these elections, which is the call at this moment, many anticipated it will be during autumn, which was later end of this year, autumn. But yet, Prime Minister Sunak has called now. So I would say this is a gamble for him, thinking that they will catch the opposition parties by surprise, and thinking that the economy, the inflation rate has gone down a bit, the price of energy has gone down, and maybe they are in control of the illegal immigrant and all this. So he called for a quick election, but nevertheless, it appears that it didn't turn out as what he intended to.
Yeah, politics is always a game of probability. But you've mentioned about the challenges that the next Prime Minister, and of course you've outlined also the issues about health, housing, economy. How big are the challenges facing the next Prime Minister, especially when he has to deal with the rising cost of living and as well as housing?
Yeah, true. Whoever who will go in, who will move into 10 Downing Street by Friday or next week, for example, will have to face this legacy. And to be fair to the Prime Minister Sunak, I think he has tried his best, and he has inherited this problem from his predecessors. The pandemic, as you also mentioned, is a global issue. Most countries in Europe and even in Asia face that, the economy. So whoever who goes in now, whether Sunak remains in 10 Downing Street or he has to move out and another man comes in, that is the major challenge. The economy. People are not happy with the current economic situation, rate. So this will be a major challenge. And also to settle the illegal immigrant problem. That has been also a major topic during the Prime Minister debate or the elections debate. There have been suggestions during the Sunak administration that sending some of these people to Rwanda, and that backfired tremendously. Opposes international law, human rights, and things like that. So, and these are sometimes beyond the control of the UK Prime Minister. If people come in illegally, the Prime Minister is at a catch-22. Shoot them, or you have to deal with this because these are human beings who are trying to come in. So I wish the best for the new Prime Minister.
Indeed. Now, Doctor, I'm just wondering, and I'm asking you to, have a glimpse into your crystal ball. If Sir Keir Starmer were to become the Prime Minister next week, tomorrow, how might Labour's policies may impact governance in UK, and what changes could we expect in terms of foreign policy, including relations with Malaysia?
All right. Let's focus on Malaysia since we are in Malaysia. The UK-Malaysia or KL-London relations, I would say, have been fairly cordial throughout the years. Yes, there were rocky times in the early 80s, like by British last, but overall, relations have been cordial. And it has been built on, I would say, 3 pillars. The first pillar, economic relations. The second pillar is on social, or in more particular, education. That's why we have the British Council, and every year, a large number of Malaysians who will go to the UK or go to the UK to further their studies, either at the first degree level, right? And the third pillar is on security. We do have still security cooperation with the UK, for example, to the 5-Power Defence Agreement. So these are the 3 pillars that I would say have been important in between Kuala Lumpur and London. Whoever who occupies 10 Downing Street will still maintain these 3 pillars, and it will still, I would say, relations between Malaysia and the UK will continue based on these 3 pillars.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us this evening. That was Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers, Deputy Executive Director of Development Research and Innovation at the Asia-Europe Institute of UM. We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
Bekalkan pack bertenaga khasiat Milo untuk kembara dunianya. Milo, teroka dengan tenaga.
Kau hari-hari pakai uniform, ada logo dekat dada kau. Ada Allah, ada Muhammad, kau tak malu.
Share. See dan stream on demand atau sila ke saluran 480. Penyasaran subsidi diesel di Semenanjung tidak akan memberi kesan kepada harga barangan keperluan di Sabah, Sarawak dan Labuan.
660 individu berusia bawah 21 tahun di Sarawak telah diberikan kewarganegaraan.
Sarawak kini menjalinkan kerjasama dengan Bank Dunia dalam menjayakan perdagangan karbonnya.
Daulat Tuanku.
Bekalkan pack bertenaga khasiat Milo untuk kembara dunianya. Milo, teroka dengan tenaga.
Asia tumpuan utama dunia. Dengan ekonomi yang semakin rancak, pembangunan lestari dan tenaga boleh diperbaharui, apakah pula impak kecerdasan buatan AI dalam perkembangan teknologi dan masa depan pekerjaan? Kami mendalami setiap berita dan cerita. Saksikan diskusi, dialog dan laporan khas di Agenda AWANI Asia bersama koresponden khas kami setiap Sabtu 9 malam di semua platform Astro AWANI.
Welcome back to Consider This. You are with me, Hafiz Marzukhi, and we are continuing our conversation about the UK elections tonight. Right now, we have Karisma Putra Abdul Rahman. He is the Policy Research Analyst on Foreign Affairs and International Security Division at Bait Al Amanah. Karisma, how is the first post-Brexit election shaping party platforms and voter priorities, and what are the emerging issues now that Brexit has been implemented?
Hello, Hafiz. Thank you for having me here tonight. Well, to answer your question, now that the Brexit-centric debates have started to relax a bit, we can now see that domestic issues now start to come up the ladder in terms of importance. So the economy and the cost of living crisis is now at the forefront of what's on the mind of UK voters. And the NHS and how it must be improved and issues with the waiting list is up there as well, equally as important to UK voters. And we can now see that actually there is a bigger emphasis on climate change and environmental policies. And there's also a continued focus on immigration, but within new policy frameworks. So with the Conservatives, you have the points-based system and the Rwanda scheme. And Labour is going on a tangent here with a reform of that system and a new border security command. And there's also now more of an increased emphasis on international trade relationships. There is more of a focus on deals with emerging economies and the Commonwealth nations. And there is, of course, that significant point that Labour's pledge to remove unnecessary barriers for EU trade.
Yeah.
And as for voter priorities, there is a lot of it is shaped by Brexit's consequences. So with Brexit costing the UK economy an estimated £100 billion every single year, and with concerns over NHS staffing due to reduced EU immigration and the renewed interest in UK's global role and influence, it seems that the election landscape now and what's on people's minds is vastly different from the last general election.
I see. So how have the personalities of or the public images of the leaders, Keir Starmer and also Rishi Sunak, influenced the voter perception this time around?
For Rishi Sunak, the elephant in the room is, of course, his wealthy background, of that being around £800 million worth. And he is perceived by many as being out of touch with the average voters. There was a recent word cloud recently released by the BBC, and the first thing that comes to mind of voters is rich, greed, and conservative. So the Conservative campaign has then pivoted its campaign focus on economic management and fiscal responsibility, but it still has to navigate challenges connecting with voters amidst this cost of living crisis. It's hard to talk about economic management when the incumbents are having a cost of living crisis themselves. As for Keir Starmer, he emphasizes his image of coming from working class roots and his background as a public prosecutor, of course. And he is positioning himself as a change candidate after 14 years of Conservative rule. And his campaign and this aura around Keir Starmer It focuses on the relatability and the understanding of everyday concerns. So initially, he was kind of criticized for his lack of charisma, but he's started to gain traction with an increased focus on his background. And so overall, this impact on the campaign's dynamics is that Labour is leveraging Starmer's background to connect with voters on economic issues, while Conservatives are kind of struggling to overcome perception of Rishi Sunak as being wealthy and disconnected. And this personality contrast shaped debates on economic policy and social issues, with Starmer's background really resonating more with voters amidst the current cost of living crisis.
Well, Karisma, you mentioned about Keir Starmer's particular image when it comes to economic issues. How might Labour's proposed economic policies differ from the Conservatives, particularly regarding austerity measures and also public service funding?
Okay, so for Labour's approach, it's of course on a tangent compared to what the Tories are doing. So the Labour approach is, of course, to end austerity measures and to increase public service funding, in particular for the NHS and for education. And to fund their proposed economic policies in the manifesto, they're taking a bit of a unique approach because they are indeed maintaining that 25% corporation tax that is the current status quo. So they're not going to be budging on that, but instead they will be trying to increase the government's budget by, first of all, targeting tax dodgers and non-doms. So non-doms are essentially foreign citizens living in the UK but do not pay tax to the UK. Their tax residency is elsewhere. So trying to get that sorted, and then as well as also implementing windfall taxes on oil and gas companies. And finally, taxation on private schools through placing VAT on their tuition. So their kind of approach is a focus on economic growth through public investment. And this is in addition to their Green Prosperity Plan aiming to create sustainable jobs in the clean energy sector. So to contrast that with the Tories' approach, there is a continued emphasis on tax cuts with £17 billion worth annually proposed. And their approach focuses on private sector-led growth and reduction in public spending in some areas, which of course is very much unpopular right now. So there is a big emphasis on fiscal restraint and balanced budgets. So the key differences right now between the Labour approach and the Tory approach is that the Labour's interventionist approach versus the Conservative market-led recovery, Labour's focus on public sector investment versus the Conservatives' emphasis on tax cuts, and the different approaches to funding public services.
So, okay, those are the economic portion. How does the environmental platforms of, for example, Green Party and other smaller parties challenge or complement the agendas of these two major titans of these major parties?
Right. So when you think of environmental policy, when you look at the UK landscape, the first party that comes to mind is, of course, the Green Party. And they've been pushing for more and more ambitious climate targets beyond the major parties. They've been really pushing the step towards a sustainable future. And they are starting to expand their focus beyond their traditional urban areas of Brighton and Bristol to slightly more rural constituencies. And they've really started to get the mind of suburban and rural voters in line with why sustainability is so important. And they have, of course, influenced debate towards more aggressive climate action. So the impact of this on major parties is that Labour is adopting a stronger environmental stance, and that could actually potentially absorb some of the Green voters. And the Conservatives are then under pressure to balance economic and environmental concerns. But because of the actions of these smaller parties, such as the Green Party, both major parties are pushed towards more comprehensive climate policies.
Do we see similar sort of influence when it comes to the healthcare system? What specific plans do the major parties have in addressing challenges? As we know, NHS is a big issue in the UK, and especially considering all the current issues, the strikes, and as well as the issue of manpower.
Yes, the current crisis with the NHS, I think, has been on the headlines for a very, very long time. And Labour plans to kind of revamp and reform everything. So right now, Labour's plans are to have a £1.1 billion investment to reduce waiting lists. And there is a focus on preventative care to reduce long-term pressures. So they're thinking long-term here. And they're also pledging to recruit and retain more NHS staff and to, of course, improve mental health services, which became more and more apparent after the COVID pandemic. And there's also a proposal by them to reform the NHS pension scheme to actually try and retain experienced staff. On the other hand, when you look at the Conservative plans, there is a bigger initial investment, so £3.4 billion worth, but specifically in NHS technology. And they aim to build 40 new hospitals by 2030. And they're also trying to continue on the support for their current NHS long-term plan and trying to focus on efficiency and digital transformation to reduce the issue of the long waiting times for the NHS.
Yes. Of course, we've covered, the economic, health, and also the environmental policies. Next is what I'm curious about is I'd like to know your thoughts on other parties, smaller parties like the Reform UK. How influential are them this time around? As we know, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has even come forth and said that please vote for Conservative and not Reform because we need to be a credible or stronger opposition. What's your thoughts on Reform UK?
Yes. I think that, Reform UK, especially under the leadership of, the divisive figure that is Nigel Farage, they really have a big potential, an opportunity to split the Conservative vote, especially those leaning more further to the right. And this is especially the case in Northeast England and Wales. So they're really trying to appeal to the far-right populists. And that is probably why Rishi Sunak is trying to plead with voters to stick with the Tories rather than go towards Nigel Farage's Reform UK. So right now they're projected to score about 15 to 70% of the votes. And it's kind of forcing the Conservatives to adopt stronger stances on immigration and EU relations. And they're also trying to challenge the consensus on climate change policies. And because of that, they're trying to appeal to the Conservative voters. Labour has a very big advantage here because they're not under that much pressure from the Reform UK compared to their Tory counterparts. And when we look at the Liberal Democrats, they have the potential to gain a lot from tactical voting and from actually Tory voters who are pro-Palestine. And the charisma behind Sir Ed Davies' election stance have been bringing more attention to the Lib Dems, and they have certainly become a party that one must pay attention to when considering the UK election. So overall, these smaller parties, they're shaping policy debates on key issues of climate, immigration, regional concerns that could potentially affect the outcome in certain marginal seats. So forcing these smaller parties are forcing the major two parties to address the concerns of specific voter groups, and they may be contributing to the potential fragmentation of the traditional two-party dominance, although it will not be as fragmented as the 2010 elections.
So in the final minute that we have, Karisma, how does the UK election compare with the rise of the far-right movements in other parts of Europe? Because you see, France is also having some sort of an election right now. The parliamentary election will see the rise of Marine Le Pen. How does UK compare to, the trends in Europe?
Yeah, with France going into the second half of their parliamentary election, Marine Le Pen has been seeing immense gains there. So France is really seeing significant far-right gains. And this is in big contrast to, of course, the UK, who is very much looking like they're shifting towards the centre-left with Labour's projected victory. It's more of the broader European trends of the European kind of continental Europe. The UK bucking trend of far-right gains seen in Italy with the Brothers of Italy, Sweden with the Sweden Democrats, and potentially France with the National Rally. There's a lot of implications here for European politics, economics, and social policies. So, but at the end of the day, whether they go far right or towards the left, there is a real shared sense of common concerns: economic struggles, immigration, and political disillusionment. For both people in the UK and France, there's a sense of failure of established parties to address these real needs of the people.
Thank you so much, Karisma, for your time. That was Karisma Putra Abdul Rahman. He's a policy research analyst from Bait Al Amanah, and that wraps up this edition of Consider This. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Thanks for watching and good night.